safety of women when they're out walking alone. Women across the UK have spoken out about the dangers of leaving the house,
need to feel free to walk the streets day or night,
fears and frustrations on social media. One was our own political correspondent, Kate McCann. Her tweet has now been liked nearly 100,000 times. She said, "What happened to Sarah Everard has hit home hard for so many women because we make the calculation she did every day too.
KCMN
We take the longer, better lit route, push the fear aside for the voice that says, don't be daft, you've every right to walk home alone at night and be safe. You tell your friends it's fine, it's just around the corner, I'll text when I'm back. But still we make a plan. Keys grip between fingers, we map the corner shops we could duck into en route. We shop shoes for trainers in case we need to run. Keep our music low or turned off. Even being on the phone has downsides. One eye is always on the person in front or behind. Would they help me? Might they be a threat? Should I cross the road? Would that make it worse? Are there lights on in any of these houses if I need to pretend this is where I live? You're a grown woman, and in no other area of your life do you feel so vulnerable. You resent it, even though you understand there is a risk, however small. It's frustrating and tiring and constant. And yet, sometimes, despite all those calculations, it still isn't enough." That was Sky's Kate McCann. I read that last night, and like so many of you, thought exactly every single one of those things. We all do it. Let's bring in our panel now. Joining us is one of the organisers of the Reclaim These Streets vigil, Anna Burley. Also, equalities barrister Graham Anderson, gender justice specialist Natalie Collins, Galdem's politics editor Moya Lothian-McLean, and the Telegraph's women's editor Claire Cohen. Hello, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you very much indeed for joining our discussion today. Anna Burley, to you first. You are one of the organisers of a vigil on Saturday in memory of Sarah. Just tell us what it is that you've arranged.
So on Saturday at 6 p.m. On Clapham Common at the bandstand, we've invited everyone, not just women, to come, not just to shine a light for Sarah, but also for all women who are victims of violence, harassment, who don't feel safe on the streets.
And Anna, I said at the beginning as I read out those tweets that this has started a national conversation, hasn't it? It has resonated with so many of us because it has brought all of our fears to the surface. It has brought experiences that we have all had to the surface. And I wonder if I can turn to each of you and ask you to tell us about your experiences of this.
Starting with me?
Yes, Anna, starting with you.
Yeah, no, sorry, I just didn't want to talk over anyone.
Jurisdiction.
Yeah, absolutely. We've all been there, whether it's sort of not being sure that someone's following you or not when you're walking home late, or you're in a pub and someone grabs your bum and gropes you. Too many experiences to want to have to go into all of them.
And Natalie, Anna used the word just when somebody does it, and that's part of the problem here, isn't it? We normalise these behaviours. Can I ask your experiences?
Yeah, I think similar to what everyone else is saying, that this is kind of ubiquitous across our lives, whether we are actually being threatened or whether we have this anxiety because of previous experiences or just growing up in a world where as girls we're taught we need to manage ourselves, dress differently from a very young age, really. And so I think it is something we all live with as women and often don't really talk about, and I think that's what this terrible case has raised for women, in the sense that while this is something that happens rarely, the attack from a stranger, the fear is very real, and just because it's very small around murder, the fear of sexual harassment, of sexual assault, those fears are there's lots more risks of that in society as well.
Moya, tell us about that fear and how it makes you feel.
When this question was asked, immediately I thought of an incident about 2 weeks ago now when I was out my bike and I just paused at the end of the street and a man came up and stopped me. And that hadn't happened in a while, I think, because I've been inside for such a long period. But just being out there and this man suddenly talking to me, started asking questions about, where was I from, where did I live, etc. And it's that intrusion into your public space, that feeling that you're, just by existing in the public sphere, that your body is not your own, that your presence there is not your own, that at any time you can be interrogated. And I'm sure he meant absolutely no harm, but the fact is that I felt fear. And talking about this and the entire, the disappearance of Sarah has brought all of that back from the youngest age. I remember walking home from school and plotting out if someone snatched me, how I'd drop my possessions so that the police or whoever was looking for me could follow a trail and they'd have something to go off. And the fact that that was built in from such a young age, unconsciously, says so much.
Yeah, you make me think about an experience as you talk about. I'm sure he meant no harm, and I had an experience coming into work here on a really early shift, and it was probably about 2:30 in the morning, and I got into my car and I did what I always do, which is run to the car outside my house and lock the door instantly. And there next to me at the passenger window was a man's face, peering in through the window. And my heart was pounding. I drove away as fast as I could until I got to a lit area and could sit and calm down. And I'm sure it was perfectly innocent, that he meant no harm. But in that moment, in the darkness, that was all of my fears coming to fruition. And Claire, that is what this awful, awful disappearance of Sarah Everard has done, hasn't it? It has brought all of those fears, the thing that we push away and we say it couldn't happen. It has brought those right up to the surface.
It absolutely has. I mean, I live about 10 minutes away from where she went missing, and just seeing at the weekend all the leaflets that were all over the local area, it really confronts you with actually the feeling that it feels like it could be any one of us. And I know that a lot of my friends, especially local ones, feel the same way. Scotland Yard have obviously gone to great lengths, I think Natalie just said before, to kind of press home that this is a rare situation. But for me, that really ignores the fact that this is on a sliding scale. This is on a spectrum. And the reason that so many women have been so deeply affected by this is that we've all experienced microaggressions, incidents on that spectrum that actually we feel like, had we been in a different time or place, had there not been someone else around, had we not been able to run, might have turned into something more terrifying and more serious.
Graham, I don't want to leave you out because I do want to ask you about a feeling of threat, but I'm going to come back to it. We're going to pause because Jess Phillips, the Labour MP, is in the Commons at his International Women's Day debate. She is reading out a list of all the women killed by men in the last year. Let's listen.
This day, these are the women killed in the UK, where a man has been convicted or charged as the primary perpetrator in the case. Vanita Knoll, Tracy Kidd, Nellie Mustafa, Zahida B, Josephine Kay, Shadika Mohsin Patel, Maureen Kidd, Wendy Morse, Nagiba Alariki, Elsie Smith, Kelly Stewart, Gwendolyn Bound, Bruce Williams, Victoria Woodall, Kelly Fitzgibbons, killed alongside her two daughters.
Labour Ms. Jess Phillips reading out names of all women killed by men in the last year during Commons debate.
Zubaydah Salangi, Betty Dobbin, Sonia Calvi, Marianne Ishmael, Daniela Esperita Santo, Ruth Brown, Denise Keane Barnett Simmons, Jadwiga Sigjelski, Emma Jane McPartland, Louise Atkinson, Silk Hirshon Jones, Hyacinth Morris, Louise Smith, Claire Perry, Aya Hashim, Melissa Belshaw, Yvonne Lawson-McCann, Lindsay Alcock, Anita Zedin, Nicoletta Zedin, Mandy Houghton, Amy Leanne Stringfellow, Bieber Henry, Nicole Smallman, Dawn Bennett, Gemma Marjoram, Carolina Zia Vincian, Rosemary Hill, Jackie Hoadley, Cole May Lloyd, Kerry Woolley, Shelley Clark, Bernadette Walker, Stella Frew, Dawn Fletcher, Deborah Jones, Patricia Wybeck, Theresia Gordon, Esther Egbon, Suzanne Baird, Belvinda Gahir, Linda Cooper, Lorraine Cox, Suzanne Winnister, Maria Howarth, Abida Karim, Saman Mir Sanchavi, Vayan Mangrio, Purna Kameshwari Sivaraj, killed alongside her 3-year-old son, Louise Rump, Julie Williams, Rhonda Humphreys, Nicole McGregor, Angela Webber, Carol Wright, Sarah Smith, Ildiko Bettasan, Kimberly Deakin, Mary Gladders, Paula Leather, Caroline Kyle, Lauren May Bloomer, Hansa Patel, Helen Bannister, Marta Vento, Andrea Rodriguez Guilherme, Joanna Baruca, Azaria Williams, Catherine Granger, Eileen Dean, Sue Addis, Carol Hart, Jacqueline Price, Mary Wells, Tiprat Argatu, Christy Fruin, Sawed Belaha, Anne Turner, Nataya Elliott Cleverly, Rosemary Tinton, Ranjit Gill, Helen Joy, Emma Robertson, Nicole Anderson, Linda Maggs, Carol Smith, Sophie Moss, Christina Rowe, Suzanne Hanabe, Michelle Rizanek, Vyaslora Mesjuazga, Judith Rayard, Anna Oskiankova, Tina Eyre, Katie Simpson, Benelin Berg,
Here's an
and
interesting spot.
2-year-old daughter,
I'll give you that.
Samantha Heap.
Says €1 equals $1.39 US.
Beijing.
£1 equals $1.17
There has been
euro.
much debate over what I would say at the end of the list. Her name rings out across all of our media.
Just a thought for you, Liz Jones.
That the name of Sarah Everard would never be on any list. Let's pray every day and work every day to make sure nobody's name ends up on this list again.
Jess Phillips there in the House of Commons reading out, as she does every year, the names of women who have been killed by men in the last year. Since she did it last year, 118 women have been killed in such a way. That is one every 3 days. And let's get some response to that from Natalie Collins. Listening to that list, Natalie, utterly heartbreaking. There are no words.
No, it's absolutely horrendous to listen to those names. Every single one of those women represents a human being who will have suffered in terrible ways because men chose to hurt them, chose to kill them. And usually that will have come after a prolonged period of torture and coercive control and harm. And the children that have lost mothers and the families who have lost somebody who matters to them and the friends, the level of suffering is off the scale, and that doesn't, that list doesn't look at all the women who have also been severely harmed and haven't been killed. This is just a horrific reality that we're dealing with, and we're talking today about the risk we face on the streets, but the reality is that as women, the risk we face in the home is significantly greater than the risk we face on the streets.
And Moya, as we were listening to that list, you couldn't help but hear the names of children who were killed alongside their mothers.
Yes, it's made me very emotional, actually. I think that, as it's been pointed out, these are not just individual tragedies, and it's part of a much bigger picture, which is an institutional failing, and which I think is due to institutional sexism and disregard for the safety of police with those who are entrusted with it, safety of women for those who are entrusted with that. And it shows that what we're seeing, these deaths, they're a tip of a really horrific iceberg. The abuse that takes place in the homes, the survivors that we don't hear about on those lists, they matter just as much as those deaths, and we should still be trying to protect them. But there is, rape prosecutions have the lowest level in, I think, a decade. Reports of abuse has gone up. We've just legitimised, essentially, violence against women by undercover police officers recently. And you have to ask, as part of this, are our responses to violence against women, which is to entrust the police with that, is that enough?